Okay. We are looking at our fake agency, our fake city here called Omega. I am in the configuration environment. Just side note, that's a practice, or as it says, configuration environment. You all should have by now been provided access to staging. If you haven't been, please don't hesitate to reach out to your sign project manager. And or if you're not sure if some of your folks have been provided a login yet, please reach out. We want to make sure at this stage in the game that everybody has access to your agency's practice environment. And following this meeting, I'll be sending out all the code module submittal documents. So as soon as we're done here, I'll be sending out an email to this group. It probably won't be to everybody that's individually participating, but to those persons that are representative of each of your agencies. Those submittal documents are important. They allow you to make some of the configuration decisions for your specific agency, and or if you're redoing code, some of you are redoing code, meaning it was configured for you some time ago, stopped using it potentially somewhere in between, and you'd like to enhance it, change it, make it better, whatever the phrase might be. Same submittal documents. So just a note, following the meeting, submittal documents will be coming for customization. All right. Just a reminder, I simply have the record list open here. In the top right corner is the toggle to switch modules. You will only see the modules that your user's been provided access for. So I'll be going to code compliance. However, just a reminder, preference management, which by the way, I'll just close out of that. Launchpad, my pages. Reminder that we did recommend that you favorite the preference management page so that it's available in your pages. If you haven't done that yet, you simply go to the all pages list, scroll down to preference management, bubble in the star to make it available under your pages. So preference management allows you to toggle in full for the module you'll be working in the immediate. So if you are a person that functions across modules, meaning you have access to the building module, planning module, public works module, code, you do need to use the preference management toggle to actually perform work in the different modules. The record list simply allows you to see information across modules. However, to actively do work, updates, inspections, result inspections, anything like that, ultimately you do have to use preference management. Toggle for the code compliance module. By the way, you never have to fill in this secondary drop down here. Submit to save your preferred module. Always do a hard refresh. That's the little kind of recycle looking icon I'm kind of circling around in the upper left here. Hard refresh. Yes, it will close any and all pages that you already had open. But what it will do is it will go out to the server and grab a new copy of everything that it's loading specific to your preference. Notice now the record list loaded directly for code compliance as a default. No. I didn't have to select it.
No, it didn't.
Oh, somebody's not muted if you don't mind muting. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and start from the top. Let's look at creating a new case. I might use terminology record, case. Those are synonymous, so whatever terminology kind of fits best for you. But creating a new record essentially for code compliance. Code enforcement is creating a new case. Now, I can create new from the Launchpad. That fly out, create new. If I already have the record list open, I can use the new button here. Same. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. let's talk about the different ways that you can receive information, aka complaints, right? For code enforcement, this module, just so you know, I want to be very clear right out of the gate, this particular module that we offer is fully redacted from online. There's no online complaint form that feeds into this. Code compliance, code enforcement, for the purpose of what we provide at no cost to all of our participating agencies, is fully a back office tool for code officers. There's no kind of input for people to lodge their complaint, so to speak. They still have to come through whatever front door you already have in place. They either, you have maybe on your local website, you have some sort of complaint or web form that they can use that comes into like a shared email. They can call you potentially. I'm saying these are, whatever options you offer today for constituents to lodge a complaint essentially, or request some sort of compliance response. Those things need to stay in place. Those all still apply. None of that goes away. So the way that people start with your agency should remain with whatever you currently have in place, because the code module that we provide allows you to create the case and then manage it from there on. But there is no online input from customers. So however it is they're complaining, by phone, by email, by a web-based form, coming into your office, any of those different mechanisms would have you creating a new case record. So let's talk about the 3 different record types that we offer in the code module. First, I'm just going to talk about the code investigation records. That's the core record type. This is where you would create a record for any incoming complaint or inquiry or request for compliance services. Animal control, parking, whatever local, your code compliance, whatever locally you have adopted that your code compliance covers, can come through the system, can be logged into the system. It is a back office tracking tool for you to use. The code investigation case, like I said, you would create this record, or you would open one of these records for any incoming complaint or request for service. The code authorization record is brand new, actually, so you guys are really benefiting from this. In fact, it's only a few months old. The code authorization record type allows you it allows you to establish some sort of approval for certain types of things that code compliance might monitor or manage, like temporary RV placement. Now that sounds kind of crazy, because typically in my world, 23 years of experience in construction services and comm dev, and I come out of City of Salem, just so you know, that's kind of my background as permit services supervisor there for a lot of years before coming to building codes. That's typically managed at planning. However, a lot of agencies, planning departments, have delegated the tracking pieces to code enforcement or code compliance. By the way, I use those interchangeably. They might not be interchangeable to you, however you name yourself. Our module is called code compliance, but I've heard it both ways. So either or, this module is for you, for code enforcement, essentially. But that code authorization record allows you, so it's not necessarily complaint driven, it's actually request driven. Code authorization was requested by one of our participating agencies, Klamath County, as an enhancement request. They had like I want to say it's some sort of camping. They allow some sort of temporary camping type scenario. And they needed a way, and code compliance actually managed manages it, at least in terms of the tracking, to make sure that they're gone by the end of the temporary approval period, or that they're setting up correctly according to local code requirements, these kinds of things. So if there's anything that you need to manage that's more about like an authorization, approval, and tracking versus complaint or issue driven, the code authorization record will allow you to manage that. It actually even has a printable document, so just an authorization type document, an approval document that you can provide to, let's just call them applicants, right? That you can provide to the requesting party, you know, to signal your approval, right, in writing. Just a side note, we still have somebody that maybe doesn't have their microphone muted, so I'm just hearing a lot of kind of movement or whatever. So just a quick reminder, at the top of the screen, there's a microphone. It should have a little line through it if you're muted. And then the inquiry. Code inquiry record is the catch-all for everything that doesn't fit one of those two. So if it isn't kind of complaint or issue driven, or like request for service, things like, you know, animal control or parking, then the code inquiry record is a very bare bones record type. And it just allows you to document kind of customer interactions that might rise to the level of documentation. Now, for some of you, like Ontario, City of Ontario, where you are actual law enforcement managed, we have a few other agencies that are also law enforcement managed or run. We hear that you need to document pretty much any incoming inquiry that comes in kind of officially for you. And so the code inquiry record would allow you to do that if, depending on whatever they're coming in for, just really didn't warrant or rise to the level of an actual enforcement review, or, you know, trip out into the field, and it didn't involve any sort of approval or authorization. So you got kind of this other option to document anything else coming in over the counter or through, you know, whatever the channels of communication might be. You get all three of these. I'm going to go ahead and start an investigation record. I'm just going to say our, you know, front counter received a phone call. That'll be kind of my pretend business case here. Neighbor on neighbor complaint. The neighbor, she wants to, you know, she wants to lodge a complaint. Let's say we took a phone call, documented the information, or either I could create this record live while I'm on the phone if you're that good. Sorry, when we're using Teams to actually display the load time on things takes much longer. So it's just opening kind of an intake form, so to speak, the bare minimum information we need to collect. I'm just going to maximize that. We have a project name field at the very top. First and foremost, these light gray blue banners that separate sections. I know they're fairly light colored here, but as new to the code module, please pay attention to these. It will tell you which sections are required and which sections are not required. Is required, not required. Now, all this means is for intake, for you to kick off a new record. Those parentheses kind of remarks indicate minimum requirements to create a new record. Now, ongoing, once you create the record, you might want to collect that information thereafter. But just to get a record created, these different section requirements have to be met one way or the other. So project name, I'm going to just minimize here real quick. When I'm looking at the record list, project name is this column right here. It allows an added level of little commentary. It's about 30 characters of information that you can add to kind of camp on to the rest of the information we're going to collect kind of systematically. A record number is automatically assigned. A description of work will be required. We'll be walking through all this. Property information, essentially where it's located at, if that can be identified. I'll be talking about that. The status of the record, when it was opened, when it tentatively expires. By the way, most of this is customizable. The owner of the property, and then who created the record. So, you know, there's some pieces of information you might want to know just at this bird's eye view. The record list essentially is bird's eye view information about each individual record that's been created. Project name allows you an additional piece of information that you choose to include or record. I'll be talking about it, but a lot of agencies like to assign an internal case number. So the project name field can be perfect for documenting your internal hard file number, like code compliance dash year band 25, and, you know, now 26, of course, and then maybe it's the 48th complaint you've brought in this year. You know, a lot of agencies have some sort of hard file numbering system that's internal, that's specific to you locally, that you want to retain and you want to continue to use for case numbering. Maybe it even ties into your local court system, you know, depending, I don't know, usually stuff doesn't go to that level until they're not compliant here, but, you know, it depends on how it's set up in your agency. So project name just allows us some added detail we could include. So I'll pretend that we have some sort of internal numbering system. And, you know, this is the second complaint I've taken this year. Description of work, just kind of like it sounds. I mean, more or less, it's just the intent, whatever the bare information about what they're complaining about. You know, I could say excess garbage, you know, whatever complaint they're lodging or whatever request they're making, you know, I mean, we could, and it could be multiple items, by the way. I'm going to go big here. We'll throw a lot of everything in there, right? A lot of big stuff. You know, so whatever they're saying. Now, I'm going to be really clear too, because sometimes this is what throws a lot of people off right out of the gate with our code compliance module, is they're like, wait, Kelly, we wouldn't create a record until we know it really is a code compliance infraction. And I'm like, well, I would like for you to invite you to rethink that, because this is not how this is designed, essentially. So bear with me, but we've designed this where you would create a record one for one with every incoming complaint or request for service, whether we know it rises to the level of an actual code violation or not, because this allows you to track it, whether it's a violation or violations, even multiple items together. Maybe 3 out of 4 of these do rise to the level of violation when we go out and do the initial inspection, but the 4th one doesn't. And that's okay. This type of setup, systematically, our process allows you to track not only all the incoming complaints and requests for service, but then it also allows you to track if it actually go to violation or not at the individual line item level. So I want to say that right away, because a lot of people are like, we wouldn't be creating this record yet, Kelly, until we've done an inspection. That's flipped in our model, because when we designed this module and we worked with multiple agencies that had requested code enforcement be camped on to the whole e-permitting product, back at that time, we were told they need to log all the incoming, they need to log complaints and cases. So this kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Even if this doesn't end up moving forward in terms of violations, then it will still function to provide you with quantitative reporting for complaints or incoming requests for service, which helps you, just because I've been in the business long enough, helps you to maintain funding, right? I mean, if I can prove I'll be right with you, Krista, if I can prove how much work we're doing, whether they all turn into violation cases or not, it's still work, right? I still have to have a staff take a complaint call or document, what they're asking for. Forgive me. Still have to create the record. I still have to send a code compliance officer into the field to do the initial inspection to determine if anything does rise to the level of violation or not, right? All of those things still have to be tracked and quantified and all of that. We all work for government, right? Cities and counties and law enforcement, all that data is still very necessary. So I just kind of wanted to put that in the front of this. Krista.
There is a comment in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Patrick, you are right, because very true. I can see how many incoming calls, AKA complaints, AKA walk-ins, AKA, whatever you want to call them, constituents, however it comes in the door, I can still get all of the data, how much came in. And additionally, get all the data about how many things ultimately turned into full-blown, compliance cases that we have to repeatedly go out and do inspection on to see if they're compliant yet, or whatever the case might be, and or refer to agency. At some point in time, it means that maybe they never get compliant, right? And so you have to refer them into the courts, and then it turns into bigger fines and all that kind of stuff. So we have reporting that allows you to kind of track it from the minute it came in and how it came in, might I add, all the way to determine if it turned into a case or not. And then if it turned into a case, all of the inspections or field visits, trips, whatever you want to call them, however many visits you made, all your interactions and everything. So, okay. We'll just keep going along here. So now I'm going to keep, creating my case. We did hear that for a lot of agencies, right out of the door, right at the beginning, that they assign incoming complaints and requests for service immediately to a code officer. If you are one of those agencies, you have the opportunity to immediately assign it right here, right out of the door. If you're not, you don't have to use this. It's not required. By the way, any required field, whether the section is required or not, only those fields with a red star, tiny red asterisk there, are required in that section. So yeah, I have to put in description of work. No, I do not have to put in a project name, no star. And no, I do not have to assign the case. I can assign it post-intake. Much further down the line, the code officers can self-assign. A manager or lead person can assign it, however you choose to do assignment. It is available for the life of the record. Address. Notice address isn't required. And some people are like, what? Their heads blow up when they see that. And I'm like, well, because a lot of times code compliance deals with stuff where it's an undeveloped parcel, illegal camping, illegal dumping, animal control. I mean, you name it, right? I mean, you guys know. For code compliance, so many times you are fielding cases, complaints on undeveloped parcels where there would be no address. If it's undeveloped, no structure, therefore no address. So you do not have to have an address. If it does have an address, like it's my neighbor, and yes, I have an address, then sure, you can put in an address. But if it just involved an undeveloped parcel, I can minimally create a record with no address. We need to give you a path to be able to create new cases where there's no address involved. So that's all that this is about. If there is an address, however, you can go ahead and enter the address. Notice the red stars on the street number and the street name. Do not fill in anything in between. You can do part of the street name that they give you. You don't even have to do the whole street name. You must do a search though. You have to validate the property information that you put in to the form. The reason that is maybe you do this already. A lot of agencies used to before they came on to e-permitting, because this is kind of a new concept where that property information has to be validated or you can't even create a new record. And the reason that is that it makes no sense for you and it does your staff no good for records to be created on bad information. So when you create any new record, whether it's an undeveloped parcel, just a parcel number, or it is something that's addressed, that has a structure like a house or whatever, or business or whatever the case might be, you have to search to validate it. If no match comes up, we have a tiny issue. Can't create a new record on an invalid address or parcel. Now, there are ways to manage the property information that is already loaded for your agency. All of your agencies, though, are long existing. The property data process is long and well established for your agencies. So even Ontario is one of our newer agencies, and Fairview, newer agency, so that property information already lives in your agency and is being regularly updated, either monthly or minimally quarterly. Meaning, as properties buy and sell, as new buildings get built and addressed, new addresses, parcel information, changes in ownership of properties, etc., should be at its worst as current as within the quarter. Now, that's up to your agencies, just so you know. E-permitting doesn't decide that on behalf of your cities or counties. Your city, when your agency came on to e-permitting, decisions were made about that at the very, very beginning, and property information is being sent to us at whatever frequency your agency sends it. E-permitting doesn't manage property data accuracy. Your agency manages that, and those processes have already been established. So I just want to let you know on that note. So I put in an address. It says, okay, that address you searched for has an associated parcel and owner. Do you want that information as well? You bet I do. I want it all, because it's going to ask me for it right here. And further down the form, it's going to ask me for the owner as well. So I'm going to grab it all at once by checking the select all. I'm going to bring in all three pieces of information into my form. I searched by address. I got had a matching parcel and parcel owner. I could have searched by parcel number, and it would have said, oh, for that parcel, there's a matching address and a matching owner. Do you want both of those pieces? Yes, same. So I can search either through address or through parcel, but I do have to search and find a match. I can't just free type in an address right here at this stage in the game. Can't. That's just not the way e-permitting works. And again, that's because it is so important to respect your time and staffing that you get good information. Right? You don't want to be going out in the field on a bogus address or something. Okay, so we've kind of filled in the where. If you kind of think about these forms to create new records is kind of who, what, where, why, when idea, right? Not to be oversimplified, but pretty much that's what they are. I mean, this is what are they complaining about? Where? The property information. Now I collect the complainant. This section isn't required, and that's because a lot of you allow anonymous complaints. If you allow anonymous complaints, then you would not fill this in if they request to be anonymous. If you do not, then despite us saying the section isn't required for technically to create a new case, procedurally, you would always require a complainant if your agency doesn't allow anonymous complaints. The other thing I tell people is, even if you do allow anonymous, I think there's something to be said for saying that. So that procedurally, you know that whoever did this intake or created this record, whether the complaint or request for service came in online, by email, by phone, over the counter, that you at least can confirm that they asked. Okay? I think there's something to be said for that. But that's your choice, right? That's kind of a process thing that you will decide locally. Now, if it's the owner is the complainant, typically they're not going to complain on themselves, just haha. But there are these quick buttons. By the way, licensed professional essentially is a contractor. These are kind of default Acela functions that come with every single record type that the system, that their software, provides. 90% of the time, these aren't going to apply in the code world. Occasionally they will. But this is neighbor on neighbor, if you recall my silly example. So I am, my caller was Kelly. I'm going to minimally, I have to get a phone number. Notice the red star. But depending on your desktop process requirements, you can also request a mailing address. You can require it. That's up to you. That's your desktop process locally. You decide that. Technically, we don't require it for a record to be created, but you decide how you want to proceed with that. Email is also not required because we still can't require email, shockingly enough, in the world. Some people don't have email. They don't want email. They don't want to live in that world. That's okay. However, if you can collect email on anybody, any part of this, whether right at the door here or for the life of the record, as the code officer goes out in the field, potentially collecting email in the field if it wasn't already on the record, only because there's tons of email functionality to be had in the system. Now, it's a little more limited in code, and the only reason that is because we don't have an input from the outside world, from the public. They can't get online and look at code cases. Again, code is fully redacted from online. Even once you create a case, nobody can get on our ePermitting Home website and look at cases. They are fully redacted. And that's because the majority of our agencies indicated that their actual code investigation work was confidential in some shape or form, that it just was not public record. So at this time, code enforcement for the tracking, for the investigation records is fully redacted. So email would only be if you wanted to push something out to the complainant or to the owner eventually once you make contact, etc. I can record an owner email once I, get moving with this case. Okay. Complaint. Look how short the form is. This little, we call this the custom fields, or essentially this is like the code specific information. Everything from here up is the who, what, where, why, when kind of stuff. But everything in this section is specific to this record type. So the complaint, and you might go, well, wait a minute, we wrote that right up here. And you did. So bear with me for some conversation on this. You're right. So I could highlight that and just do a Control-C to copy it, and I could just paste it in here. Or I'll get right with you, Krista, I'm assuming chat, or I could say more, like, car is a Chevy Nova, license plate number, 123 ABC. Sewage is on the side. I mean, I could get into the weeds as much as wanted, needed, or collected from the complainant. I suggest the gory details, so to speak, I'm just going to call them that. If you collected them or the complainant provided them, that those go here in the complaint section. Because they are not going to be necessary at this high level. This is just exactly as I said, kind of the high level summary of what they are lodging or complaining about or requesting. Down here is where I would expect to see bigger details. Okay? Does that mean you have to? No. There's no sort of validation between description of work and the complaint field. Chat says from Patrick, can the code compliance case link to the building permit? Absolutely. Excellent question. Patrick asked, can I relate a code record, a case in the code module to a building permit or a building record or planning or public works or any of the other modules? 100% absolutely you can. Will there be an opportunity to upload existing, does that say existing records, Patrick? Meaning, like, I mean, I can upload or attach any sort of documents to this record. Anything. Now, if you are asking, could you upload like historical stuff about a given address type thing? You could, but we might want to talk a little more about where would be the best place to do that. But like ongoing, you can load any sort of document to this record that you see fit. Photos, inspection reports will be attached to this record. Any sort of letters, your ticket, your infraction, like if you actually ticket them, citation, you can load the citation, you name it. So good question. Thank you for asking, because the group benefits from all of your questions. Complaint category and complaint subtype, fully customizable. Submittal coming for you to decide how you want to break down your data around complaint tracking. And don't get too wrapped around the axle that this is called complaint. Some people are like, well, I didn't know what I should put in there because not everything's a complaint. Like logistically, definitively. Okay, yeah, sure. Don't get too wrapped around that though. It's just a label. However, you need to track your data by category and furthermore by any sort of subtype. These are examples, real examples that a lot of our agencies use. Building is a category, graffiti is a category, nuisance and weeds. I mean, to me, weeds are nuisance or noxious, right? You know, graffiti maybe is about buildings, graffiti maybe in the right of way. It depends on what your agency has in your locally adopted code for compliance. What is in your bubble of compliance? What do you have to track? What are you tasked to manage by your code officers or law enforcement officers that also wear the hat of code compliance, right? So you get to decide these. Now, subtypes are a more granular breakdown of these. Unfortunately, and it's because it's almost the first question after everybody goes live, is when I select building here, this list of subtypes does not change. When I select nuisance over here, this list is the same list. There's no connection between the category selected and the subtypes that are displayed. Bummer. I would actually agree with you on that one. But today, we do not have scripting in place for that that says, depending on what the answer here, show different values here. However, we will configure it for you that way. So, for instance, let's say the top three subtype or these top three, well, just pretending, let's say these top three subtypes roll up to the building category over here. Oops, over here, sorry. Let's say these top three are about building, belong to the building category. We will configure them building dash addressing, building dash appliances, building dash camping. And then these next three belong to nuisance, just making it up. So we'll configure them nuisance dash car, nuisance dash fence, nuisance dash garbage. So we'll create a method for you to know what subtypes roll up to what larger category, but there won't be any logic actually between these two drop downs. We will manufacture the logic by the way we name these for you. So when you provide us your submittal form about these two drop downs, we will ask that you tell us the categories and then and what subtypes for each category. Okay, so notice we have multiple categories and multiple subtypes. Those are default values we will create for you, even if you don't ask for them, because it is a fact of the way that business can happen for code compliance. Like our complaint here. Garbage, dog, sewage, car. Those are very likely across categories and therefore across subtypes. So to at least do an intake, to at least document this particular complaint or request for service, I am simply indicating just at the door that there are multiple categories and subtypes involved in this particular neighbor-on-neighbor complaint. Once I create the record, then I can further break down each individual item and its individual category and subtype for reporting purposes. So don't fret, you're not going to lose reporting opportunities by allowing them to include multiple topics in their complaint or their request. You will capture that information a little bit further down the road once you've created the record. Source. These are default values, but I'm going to tell you they're customizable too, because some agencies have just one or two other little ways that reports can come in that you might want to track for reporting purposes, and we'll give you those. So if these don't fully meet your needs and cover all the bases for your local agency, we can add whatever else is missing. So obviously citizen, this is a neighbor-on-neighbor complaint, so it's going to be citizen. External agency, meaning maybe the police department referred or sent you this complaint. They were out on a case or a report or a ticket or whatever, and they observed these other issues. Anybody can report in external agency. The building department, when they're out doing physical inspections, can submit things to you. So internal staff, internal would probably be better for that. So take that back. External agency is going to be, usually it's law enforcement, but for Ontario, you are law enforcement. So, I don't know how you want to handle that, but, if you observe something out, on a separate call that you're doing as police officers or deputies, etc., then, you decide how you want to document those. Web. So if your agency has a web form that allows general constituents to complain and submit issues. And then there's just the catch-all, other. If you do say other, it'll ask you to explain. To at least say, I don't know. They faxed it in. I don't know. Does anybody have a fax machine anymore? I don't know. But I do notice And I'm probably just going to add it to our model, Stacy Krista, but email is not here ever. And a lot of agencies allow email complaints to be submitted via email. Okay, so I'm going to say citizen. Oh, well, but look. So maybe that just doesn't make sense. This is maybe more kind of the who-ish, I guess, maybe, you know, how these come together, and then kind of how they submitted it. So yeah, it's a citizen complaining, and in this case, they phoned in. So you could document if it's an email, actually. And you could even say if it was external agency, they sent it by email, or they came in person to your counter or whatever. So it looks like we might kind of have that base covered, just kind of through a separate level of detail here. So email, fax, there's fax, in-person, internal, mail, phone, voicemail, web. So I guess if they submit on web, it would be web, but that's up to you how you want to fill those out. Again, those are default values, but if there's something glaringly missing for your agency, we'll add it. I'm going to put citizen here, and I'm going to put phone call as per my example I'm using for this purpose of this training today. Zoning, not required, but some agencies want to record zoning for all of their incoming complaints or requests for service. So if you're one of them, we will populate this zoning dropdown. If you already have our planning module, we will use the same zoning dropdown that is already configured for your planning module. So we won't ask you for new or separate zoning values. If you already are using e-permitting planning, we will use the exact same values that have already been configured. So just a note there. And then on that note, if in that moment you go, oh, well, then maybe you need to do some updating of your zoning values, even those that are used by planning, then we can make any edits or updates that are necessary. And then a free text notes field, couple thousand characters. Use it, don't use it, doesn't matter. Just an open free text field. Documents. I can attach documents right here as I'm creating the record. However, if I don't have those things electronic or scanned in yet, or I didn't receive them electronically or whatever, then no worries. I don't have to attach documents here at intake. It's just available to you. I can attach documents for the life of the record. Maps, photos, inspection results, letters, citation, you name it. I'm going to go ahead and submit to create my record. Obviously, we talked extensively about what's provided here in kind of the record creation process, but that is imperative to understanding how the system is going to work. We're just coming up on 11, so the remaining hour, I will be training on all the other functionality that comes with this. These are the different inspection types that we offer in the code module today. These are not customizable, that come with the product, or the product that e-permitting administrates for you, I should say. So we have that initial inspection. You've kind of heard me use that terminology. I'll be talking kind of procedurally how we are designed to use these, but you use them as you see best for your agency. But I will talk in detail about how we are kind of designed for it to generally work, and then you decide what fits best for your agency. So clearly we have the initial inspection, then we have follow-up inspections. In our world, site visit is slightly different than a full-blown inspection. It's just like a check-in. Now, there might not be any granular difference for your agency between a quote-unquote inspection and a site visit. And if there's not, use whichever one fits best for you. Define them as you see best fit locally. Obviously, final code would assume some sort of completion. So if I'm going to go out and do a final code inspection, I am probably looking to nearing to closing the case Citation, just like it sounds. If you're going to go out into the field, you're issuing a citation, and or you can schedule the citation, quote unquote, inspection. You can schedule it on the fly in the field during your visit, or just following your visit where you wrote them a citation. You can use this inspection type to clearly, for the permanent record, document that that code officer trip was a citation. Either you knew it was going to be a citation as you went out into the field, or once you were in the field on the fly, you determined it was going to be a citation. Do you have to use a citation inspection type? No, you don't. There are other, in the documents and activities, you can just indicate that you issued a citation. So there are other ways to record that you've issued a citation. Okay. This window, however, is your opportunity to kind of pre-pend, because remember, we just created this record. This is your opportunity to kind of load the record with any inspections you know are going to happen by way of your desktop process, your local process. I'm going to tell you right out of the gate, strong consideration of this one. I'm going to kind of ask you to consider this. Every complaint or request for service is likely going to minimally require the initial inspection. Now, remember, I'm in a code tracking record type. I'm not on a code authorization record, which is that newer one, which allows you to provide some level of approval, say temporary RV placement, temporary camping, whatever it might be. This is not that record type, because some folks are now that we have that record type, the code authorization record, you can clearly kind of separate your duties between those two functions. And so a lot of agencies are like, well, we don't do an initial inspection when they're requesting a temporary RV placement or temporary camping. Okay, that's a separate record type now that you get to separately customize. This is the actual kind of complaint management side. And I would strongly recommend that you consider pending the initial inspection. It is going to be required to document your first trip into the field to even validate this neighbor's laundry list of complaints. You're going to have to at least go look to decide if anything that she said rises to the level of an actual violation. So all this is, it's not scheduling it yet. I'm just putting it on the record as a placeholder. It's called pending. And that's because I know it's going to have to happen before we can even validate this complaint or not. If you don't want to do that, by the way, you just hit cancel. I know it's grayed out now, but I would just hit cancel. I'm going to refresh. This is the refresh button in the upper right. I'm kind of circling big here. I'm going to refresh my record list because my new record wasn't showing in the list yet. Acela stinks at refreshing. I won't lie to you. Acela is a software just like Microsoft Word. I mean, e-permitting, building codes, e-permitting. There are some things we love about the Acela software, and then there are some things that also drive us just as crazy as it might drive you, right? And I'm not going to lie to you about those things. One of them is it doesn't refresh very well. You have to almost everything you look at, you got to make it refresh. So yeah. This record numbering, by the way, this is not customizable. This is out of the box. The first 3 digits identify your agency. The second 2 digits are the year band. The next 6 digits are a counter that starts at 1 at the beginning of every calendar year. And then NVST is the record type designation for the code investigation record type. You can see the authorization record type has this extension, CD auth. The inquiry, by the way, just has, I think it's INQ, CD, maybe it's CD, INQ, I think, or something like that. Oh, right here. Okay. Those are the 3 record types I showed at the top of the meeting. I'm going to go ahead and open my record now. We took the phone call. We took the complaint. I created the record. By the way, the person that creates the record can be anybody, just so you know. It can be a front counter person. It could be reception for your city or county. It could be an officer. Whatever your current kind of system is, whatever your entry points are for lodging complaints or requests for service, all still stand. You don't have to be an actual code officer to create the record. We just have to provide user privileges to those people that you want to be able to create new cases. Again, they don't have to work for code. They don't have to be code officers. It could be front counter, anybody, right? So, okay. So the record tabs are down the left here in this kind of light gray panel. They're alphabetical. There's the code investigation tab. I kind of got my little pointer on it. The code, I'm just going to jump there first, just right away to kind of show you what's there. The code investigation tab is everything I collected at intake. So if I need to change, add to, whatever, I can correct, add to, whatever. The only addition is a compliance date field. This is populated automatically by what we call workflow. So just a side note there, you don't have to manually fill this in. It will be populated by another part of the record function. If I wanted to add more notes, By the way, any text field that has these 3 little tiny lines in the corner can be stretched for easier readability. So if there was a ton of information here, rather than having to scroll or anything like that, I could just stretch the field. So just heads up on that. It's everywhere. Okay. All right, kind of top to bottom, we'll cover just the main stuff. I'm not going to dig into it, but just show you the tabs. So the property information, the address, the parcel, the owner. These tabs again, alphabetical. The information we collected as description of work, or the kind of high level complaint information, description of work. There it is right there. Project name is also included on this tab. But additionally, there are a lot of other kind of date criteria here. These things are automatically populated by different parts of functionality. So I just want to let you know, obviously code records don't issue. They're not quote unquote permits. The authorization records kind of have a similarity to that, so to speak, when you provide approval or denial of a request of for authorizing whatever kind of function, camping, temporary RV, etc. Expiration is a thing. It's in the submittal forms that we're sending over to you. Remember I said you could assign the case after you've created the record. So record assignment lives in the description of work tab. So post intake, so to speak, now that the complaint's been logged and we have a record, the case could be assigned now, or it could be self-assigned. There's an easier way to do case assignment that I'll touch on right at the end of the training if we have time. Kind of a more global way to do that. So if you're like a manager or a lead, there's an easier way to do record assignment through what we call the task list. Okay, just separate note on that. Documents tab. So now that I've created a record, I can upload any type of document. Like I said, I can load maps, photos, inspection information will be housed here, etc. But inspection information and photos taken in the field, because you can do that. We have an inspector app, Jared's on the phone here. Yay. He is our guy, our expert on our Inspector app. The Inspector app is also used for code officers, so don't let the word inspector throw you. Means you can take this product into the field with you, either on a tablet or any other handheld device, or a cell phone, etc. You can take this product into the field. You can conduct your initial inspection, site visit, whatever you want to call it. You can conduct that in the field, record what you found, a result, and take photos in the field using our app. And it will attach any of the photos that you take to that inspection, to that trip. And it'll be recorded for the permanent record. And as an enhancement request many years ago, Marion County Sheriff Department that uses our app, that uses our product, they said that the judge would not accept our original photos that were embedded in our inspections because the officer was typing in the date of the photo and the timestamp of the photo, and they did not find that to be admissible in court. So guess what? Jared worked with our app developer, and now the date and timestamp of any photo you take with the Inspector app is automatically embedded in the photo. It is not manually entered by anybody. So it is now considered to be admissible in court. Yay! So photos can be taken using our app, connected to that code officer's trip into the field, and any notes or information or result that they provide. And those will be saved to the Documents tab on the record. All right, let's jump into workflow. By the way, you can charge fees. If there is any sort of fees that you charge, you can do that in the code module. We find that more agencies charge fees only on the authorization record type, meaning like a temporary RV placement, temporary camping, whatever. If you do, please make sure and provide us with any of the fees that you need configured, that might be assessed and paid on code records. But you do have the ability to do that. You don't have to, but you have the option. You assess the fees, we'll configure whatever you give us. These are just fakey fake fees. That is the Oregon Inspector app, Patrick, yes. Good question.
Hey, Kelly.
Yeah, Jared.
Hey, Jared here. Just a couple notes on the Inspector app. You have to use the app and use the camera function. So when you go into the app, let's say that you've got a record created, and in the back office, you've created your initial inspection and you assign it to yourself or whoever may be the person going out and looking at it. That shows up on the Inspector app on your job list. When you go into that, we call it an inspection, but when you go into that and you go to result it, you're given the option. There's a camera icon, and when you touch it, you can either use the camera or upload photos. And I just wanted to note that if you upload photos, it's not placing that time and date stamp on it because you could have taken those photos at any time. So if you have to choose the camera icon or the camera option so that you're actually using the app itself and the camera through it to take the picture, it'll then put the time and date stamp on it. So just to clarify that. And then as soon as it's submitted, like Kelly said, it's saved to the documents section. So what you're going to have is that first page will be your summary report, which is all the details that you wrote down. And then the next few pages will be the pictures. I do want to note that those pictures, the app does shrink them down. So they're not full page pictures. They're shrunk down to like a 3x5, or if you printed them out, maybe a little bit smaller. I mean, on computer, you can zoom in on them, and technically you could zoom in and print them, I guess. But we do that because we built it for inspectors and they're out there taking, 10, 15 pictures, and you may do the same thing. I'm just thinking court-wise, if you need those full pictures, You may get in a situation where you use the app to take them, but because of the nature of it, that you may want to take, you know what I mean, take them and have them on your camera roll or something. I'm just thinking if you needed them larger, I mean, digitally, I can tell you how to accomplish it. You just, open the PDF and zoom in and then print it like that. But anyway, just wanted to mention just some logistics there as far as the Inspector app.
Thank you so much, Jared. And Jared, will you put your contact information in the chat? Because secondary to this training, if you're pretty new to our product, you might want to schedule some time with Jared for your code officers to learn how to use the Inspector app. So, and he's your man. He's pro at this and a pleasure to work with. So there you go. And feel free to pipe in, Jared, anywhere along the way here. Fees. So we will configure fees. These are just fake fees, but essentially anything maybe you do need to assess and collect payment for. I'm going to jump to workflow because this is kind of where the magic happens in pretty much everything Acela does. Is the rest of all, thank you, Jared. Jared put his contact information in the chat. So anybody that you want to schedule independently secondary Inspector app training for your code officers, which I highly recommend, you would work directly with Jared. Workflow is the life cycle of the record from beginning to end, right? And so in code records, it's pretty short and sweet. We bring in or document, the code or the complaint or the request for service. We do some level of investigation, even if it's only initial inspection, to determine that none of the neighbors' complaints are even valid. They don't rise to the level of a violation, according to city or county code. And then the case eventually closes. Workflow is very minimal for code. However, as soon as you create a new record, you would open the active task, which is application intake or creating a new record. Your choices are, you're going to initiate the investigation or you're just going to void this record. It's created an error. The neighbor called back and said, you know what, never mind. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I'm over it. I'm not worried about it. And they withdraw their complaint or whatever. Sure, it happens. Or a record got created in error by staff. That's a void. Otherwise, you always have to initiate the investigation. And I do hear from some agencies that are a little troubled by this terminology. They're like, Kelly, we don't call it an investigation over here until we know it rises to the level of violation. So not until after the initial inspection would we call this an investigation. And I would just invite you again to not get too wrapped around the axle. This is just a mechanism to start the process. So as soon as we take in any complaint or request from service, we're gonna at least move forward to even decide if it's valid or not. So before I move off workflow, these will be your choices. So the investigation determines, so you might go out and you would do that initial inspection. So actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So now that inspection I talked about, that initial inspection, it lives on the inspection tab. Waiting for it to load here. There it is. You self-schedule this. None of the inspection, quote unquote, scheduling process is exposed to the public. So they don't, like your complainants or your requesters, they have authorization. They don't self-schedule at all, like is the case for the other modules, or can be the case for the other modules. Code, because it's fully redacted, is self-scheduling. So first, this case needs to be assigned to somebody, to a code officer. Ideally, I should be assigning this. Remember that it is assignment, case assignment is under description of work right here. I mentioned before that it can be done through the My Tasks page. So let me just demonstrate that very quickly. I'm going to opening the My Task page. Complaint received, cases that have come in that aren't assigned yet. Notice the big blank right here under assigned staff. This particular filter will show any sort of lead person, manager, or the code officers themselves. The new cases have come in that haven't been assigned to a code officer yet. Now, there are a few garbage records in here, just so you know. This is our test city, our test environment. A closed record would never be here. Also in complaint received. So, you know, there's some garbage here. There would always be an app intake. Just FYI. Assigned to staff would be blank. You can select the record and assign it right here. So I can self-assign. So if maybe there's 2 code officers at your agency, they should be regularly every morning logging in, Launchpad, My Task page, running this filter, ideally, and they can self-assign. Self-assigning is called claim. I don't have to assign it. If I were self-assigning and I'm Code Officer Kelly, I could checkbox the one I'm going to self-assign and just claim it. And it will automatically throw my name on it. Assigning it is usually by like a third party, a lead, a manager, whatever. Yeah, I mean, same. But claiming will assign it to whomever is the person doing it. So if I'm the manager and I checkbox this top one, I say claim, it's going to assign it to me as the manager, not to the code officer. So you do have to use the assign button if it's like, you know, a person assigning to others. If the code officers are going to self-assign, then claiming works great. Say I checkbox this one and claimed it, and I went, oh my gosh, I grabbed the wrong one. I can also checkbox it and release it, which will put it back into unassigned, take me off of it. So claim and release is a way to self-assign. And if you did it in error or something, you can checkbox it again and release it. Take yourself off of it. Assigning cases is imperative. End story. Leaving cases unassigned becomes problematic for your end reporting, because we have all kinds of standard reports available to you, planning and code reports, code reports for workload. These reports show code compliance active assigned cases, code compliance activities by staff, which means by code officer and record, all the violation activity, etc. So we have a lot of canned reports, and those reports rely heavily on case assignment, not only to manage workload, meaning how many cases does Officer Kelly have versus Officer Joe? That's workload. And how long have they had those cases? Because it'll show how old the case is, it'll show activity, and it'll show assignment. But then there's also quantifying type reports. How many active cases do we have? What types are they? What categories are they? How long have we had them, etc. So we have all kinds of standard reporting, but a good majority of our reporting in code in particular does rely on case assignment, which is essentially the responsible person. Okay, and workflow kind of relies on that. Inspection. So that initial inspection needs to be scheduled. Again, you self-schedule, or the back office people schedule, or a manager schedules those, whoever you want to schedule. Checkbox the initial inspection, schedule it, add schedule. I need to minimally fill in the blue ribbon. As soon as this loads, it's not done loading, believe it or not. I need to minimally fill in the blue ribbon. I need to say who is going to do the inspection. Boop, boop. This is our fake agency here. I'll just see. We'll put Stacy, you know, Code Officer Stacy's going to do it. And it will default to today. So just a note on that. Doesn't mean you can't change that date, but it will default to today. Or you can just say get next working day, which will be tomorrow. Or it'll be the following Monday, if it's a Friday kind of thing. Or you click the calendar widget and you pick the date that you're going to go out and do this initial inspection. Scheduled start time, not required. If you want to use appointment level scheduling, you could fill this in, but it is not required. You do not, for code, you don't have to fill in the bottom section here because inspections are not being requested by outside parties. Inspections are being self-scheduled by the officers or by the code enforcement department. Submit to schedule. That initial inspection is now scheduled for today. It now says initial inspection. Now it's not pending anymore. It is now scheduled, and it says what date it's scheduled for, and it says inspector, aka code officer, who it's assigned to. Like Jared mentioned, now if I were to open our inspector app and I was Stacy, Code Officer Stacy, I could go to my job list and this would be shown. And it would include the address and all of the record. I have access to pretty much a good majority of the record detail. Almost all of it, really, at this point. So I would do the inspection. We're just kind of walking through the process here. So I'm Stacy. I get in the app. I've performed, I go out in the field and I look at what they've complained about. Right? They said 4 things. Garbage on the porch, a barking dog, raw sewage in the front yard, and a junk car. And I evaluate those things in my visit, in my trip. And so once I'm out there, I then result the inspection. So these are now mostly refined to only show those status results that apply to code. It used to be a combination of kind of code status results and like building world kind of inspection results, and they didn't really go together. Now, this list has been pared down to be explicitly those related to code. So I go out and I do that initial inspection. Well, I wouldn't suspect they'd be compliant. That would probably never apply in an initial inspection case. I could say they were non-compliant, but if I go out in the field and I determine that the complaint, my initial inspection, first site visit, that there's no violation observed at all amongst all 4 of those things, then no violation was observed. Progress accepted is probably not going to be applicable to an initial inspection. What progress is there to be accepted? We aren't actually in progress with an investigation yet. We are doing the initial investigation to determine if anything rises to a violation or not. No progress, also for a little bit further down the road. Once we're kind of in full swing, if we do actually continue with this complaint or this record, this case. Canceled, yeah, okay. Occasionally you schedule an inspection for yourself and then you end up sick today, so somebody's going to have to cancel your inspections today. Information only. You absolutely can go out and do a site visit and have it be information only, just like fact collecting. But this initial inspection, by design, is meant to ascertain if there are really any violations or not. No access and not ready, pretty evident, right? Pretty explanatory. We'll be sending out some documentation on what each of these results does, but essentially compliant wouldn't apply for the initial inspection either. I'm probably looking at no violation observed. None of these 4 things are rise to the level of violation according to our locally adopted code, or they're not compliant. So not compliant, as a code officer, I would make my notes. We are not even going to try to pretend what you want to record for notes. But let's just, for the sake of conversation, 2 of 4 have complaints are indeed violations. That wouldn't probably be enough information according to you, and I would agree with you. It's not, but just for the sake of discussion. Code Officer Kelly, or Stacy, I'm sorry, that was Stacy. I went out in the field, and 2 of those things I observed are actually local violations. Gave my result on that initial inspection. Upon confirming, now I would be doing this through the app, ideally, through the inspector app. But for me to be able to demonstrate it to you for the purpose of training, I'm actually resulting the inspection through the back office, which is the staff view of the software. And so it's asking me, hey, do you want to email out that inspection result to your complainant? That's up to you. Submit if I do, cancel if I don't. But this is only from the back office perspective. From the app, Jared can train you on how to email out your inspections, your results. Or even if you want to or not, right? Because you decide a little bit different for code. Unlike building, you have to email out an inspection result. Well, send some sort of result is not the same in code. So I'm going to cancel. I'm not going to email anything. And I'm going to return, by the way, this little window popped up just because I was demonstrating inspection resulting for you, but I'm going to close it because I just want to go back to our record comprehensively. And I should be able to refresh this tab and see that this is now resulted. We did an initial inspection. The officer decided, in fact, they are not compliant. There are some of these things that rise to the level of violation. When that is the case, the way our module is designed, you immediately go to activities. You create a new activity line item for each of the violations. So let me show you what I mean by that. So there's these 2 that start with COD, that stands for code, either a code notification or a code violation. We are designed, so I'm trading you. You would create a code violation line item for each of the things that qualified as an actual violation. A lot of agencies like to put in the code citation. If you can be that great about it, I say do it. I mean, I'm all for that. I faked it. Salem Revised Code is called SRC 105.2, or, I'm just faking it here. If you can actually cite violation, then great. You have about 30 characters here. I have already gone out in the field, and so we are in process on this violation now. There is not started, completed, waiting on someone else, and deferred. In the world of compliance and for the purpose of logging the line item violations here, once you've determined it's a violation, it's in process. It's now in the queue. You will start. Jared, I see your comment, and I'm going to say probably not this moment because I still have a bit to train on, just the core stuff. But if we have time, that might be great. In process. Now, because we already went out and did our initial inspection, and we determined that the excess garbage was a violation. So, it's not that it's not started. Here we go, right? And then I can give it a priority. Now in code, priority maybe has more weight, more bearing, because some of the things some of the violations are definitely high priority. We had City of Kaiser, there have been one of our highest volume code agencies. Shockingly, they're not that big, but their code officers are tasked with parking and some animal control. And they got a complaint of a full-sized adult horse that was being confined to a very small side yard in the middle of a subdivision. The horse, the area the horse was in was so small, the horse couldn't even turn around. So it was high priority. I mean, I can tell you now, you know, when the code officer was telling me about this case, it was definitely, they considered it very high priority. Things like raw sewage, very high priority. Anything that, you know, is a risk to health and safety, or even the health and safety of a person or an animal, or, you know, whatever, people coming into contact with the issue, obviously high. So you have the ability to rate it. You have the ability to document the violation and even to assign it to someone else. So if, say, an admin person is going to be documenting the violation, like maybe you write them up and then you pass it off to an admin person that creates the violation activities, such as myself, like I'm logging it, so it has my name in here. They would effectively assign that to the code officer. So if the code officer is not the one doing the data entry, then you would need to actually attach this violation to the assigned code officer. Now, the start date is the date you determined it to be a violation. The due date could be any sort of compliance timeline that might be in place, whether procedurally or you actually told the homeowner or the tenant or whatever, you have to have this fixed by Friday, or whatever you indicated would tentatively be a compliance date, either required or estimated, or whatever terminology you want to put on that. A lot of times, a lot of agencies use this as a compliance timeline, whether it's hard, fast, or it's just ballpark 2 weeks. Any additional level of details, not required. Also, complaint, not required. So this is repeating now that intake form section, if you recall, where here we said multiple and multiple because we had multiple line items. We had 4 things that the neighbor lodged. Only 2 of them rise to the level of a violation. Now that I'm recording them as violations in the activities on this case record, now I can actually name them the specific category for garbage. They're not multi anymore. Now I can actually label, for the purpose of reporting, this specific violation is nuisance garbage. Okay, so I just saved that violation. Oh, oops, priority. Somehow I missed the priority on there. And I logged the second violation. 2 of the 4 things were violations. And I might put the license plate number, you know, just pretending here, you know, whatever you think is most helpful. Again, it's in process now. We went out and did the investigation or the initial inspection. We've determined that that junk car has been sitting there for quite some time. The tags on it have been expired 2 years, and it's on the public street. Sorry, and it's on the public street. Not allowed, at least not in Albany where I live. So the priority, you decide. Assign it to the code officer if the code officer is not the one actually doing this data entry of the violations. Give it a category. looks like I don't have, oh, wait, yes, I do, car. I don't know if it'd be nuisance or not, but let's pretend. And then I could give it a prospective, either hard, fast, or tentative date for when they need to have that car moved. Let's say we tentative compliance date is 30 days. I've now logged the 2 things out of the 4 that the neighbor complained about that are actual violations. Oh, and by the way, I can edit these by just clicking them back open. For instance, here you might want to also cite code. I'm just faking it there. If you choose to cite the code, you can. Maybe that would be more wise than putting the license plate here. Put the license plate here. And you just start, and I can see, by the way, the license plate right there. You can start to see the list of violations, right? And these line item violations are included in our standard reporting. So any of our quote unquote violation reports will pull this information from activities, specifically the type called code violation. Now, these are kind of living, breathing line items. Now from here, the process would be, generally speaking, would be that your code officer would continue to go out and do field inspections to see if these things have been resolved or not. So I would continue to be scheduling follow-up inspections. And now I'm going to actually schedule it because I'm, Code Officer Stacy, I need to go back out in the field today. And I need to see if, they're making progress on getting rid of the junk car or the garbage. And I can schedule myself. Remember, it defaults to today, yada, 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 right? And I'm just starting to do inspections to document every time I go out there to check for compliance. And now in my notes on my inspections, ideally I would be recording one or the other or both violations have been checked on. The junk car's still there. The excess garbage maybe now is removed. Hallelujah. One thing has been resolved. So I went out and I did an inspection today and the garbage is now gone. So I would not only result my inspection as saying, maybe compliant for the garbage. Garbage has been removed, effective my inspection or observation as of today. Junk car, is still an issue or whatever in my notes on my inspection. And I come back into activities. This has now been resolved. So now I actually want to give it, where is that? Compliance date. And I want to say it's completed. I can put any sort of, garbage, remove, as per inspection, 12/26. And I could put the compliance date as today. And none of this other stuff needs filled in. I'm just saying that this violation is now off the list. Noting it is now compliant, noting it as completed, and saving that. This one is done. Now when I'm going out for inspection, I'm only checking for the junk car and so on. And so it goes. The importance of documenting the line item violations is that oftentimes we hear from agencies that different types of violations prescribe different compliance requirements. Some stuff like obviously animal cruelty or something would be like urgent, immediate, or whatever. And then in other cases, it's just this neighbor hates that neighbor and they're always complaining about each other, Then you guys have been out there 15 times and you're sick of going out there and, whatever. It just kind of depends on, what kind of violation it is. But this starts to allow you to track even the prospective compliance timelines. All of this is available to you to see also at a bird's eye view, kind of collectively in the task list. I can go to the activities tab and I can look at all of the existing activities and their due dates. I can sort by the due date. There's my top 2, but then there's all these other ones. By the way, if they're not supposed to show if they're, oh wait, sorry, I got to put a filter on it. I can say, show me things that are overdue. By the way, overdue will look at the due date, that prospective compliance timeline or hard fast timeline. That's up to you. Things that are due within a week, which means we're within a week, or to due today, we're within a day of the due date, we're within a week of the due date. It just allows you to kind of manage the timeline of different types of violations, how quickly you need to be going back and inspecting. You know, the closer we get to the prospective compliance timeline, the more important it is that I'm going back out sooner than later, kind of thing. But I can look at things not about date, I can just look at them based on the type. So I can look at all the code violation activities for our entire agency, regardless of the code officer, like who they're assigned to. I can look at who they're assigned to. I can even sort by who they're assigned to. I can look at, I'll talk about notifications here in just one second. Things that are high priority, any of those violations that you marked high priority. Any filter that is preceded by the word my is about the logged in user. So if I'm Patrick as a code officer and I come into the my task page, any filter I select for my are going to be things that are legit assigned to me. My activities that are still active, my department, all activities, my overdue stuff, my things due today, my, the my is about whoever is logged in looking. Any of the filters that don't say my are about the whole department. So the whole code work group comprehensively. Everybody's violations that are due within the next week or due within 2 weeks, so to speak. And due, again, loosely used. It's just conceptually allows you to track prospective compliance timelines. Now, you can actually generate a letter, not through Acela. Just so you know, we tried hard. We had an enhancement request from Lynn County to develop a citation report that they could generate a citation out of Acela. We could not get there. And we couldn't get there because the actual ticketing template that many of you, I'm not going to say all of you, but that a good majority of you, we found out, use is the state police citation form. And guess what? Building codes does not control that form. So, and it is numbered. Each citation is uniquely numbered. And we could not get there. We could not get building codes. E-permitting could not recreate the Oregon State citation. Not technically we could, of course we could, but we couldn't impose on the state police process and the forms that they own. Short story. The answer ended up being no. So we cannot produce a citation for you, and it ended up being actually quite a legal conversation. We cannot reproduce a citation out of the software that meets those requirements. We were pretty much told, that's not the business building codes e-permitting is in, and so it went, and that's okay. So you would still issue citations in the same way you issue citations today. I might suggest that if you're not doing it through some sort of electronic mechanism, that you scan those in and attach them to the documents. If you issue a citation on this, you could keep going out and doing inspections. They're not compliant. D-days come, they are not compliant. You gave them 2 weeks. You keep warning them, whatever warning letters, anything you do in between, and they are not compliant. End story is you're finally going to issue a citation. Then you issue the same citation you issued today. No warning letters either, Anastasia. Good question. And that's because we just found there's way too much diversity between each of you. There was so much variation between how what Lynn County wants to say in a warning letter versus say Ontario or Marion County as the sheriff's department. Holy cow. Marion County's documents had to be very legal because they are law enforcement documents. And, I'm not saying all of your documents aren't legal or law, abiding per se, or however you want to label that. But we found that it just became extremely difficult for us supporting 100+ agencies to try to make singular warning letters across all of you. We just couldn't get to what everybody wanted separately. And it got down to the fact that each agency had to say a certain thing to stay legal, so to speak, or to meet their quote unquote local requirements. And we just couldn't do it one to so many. And so I'm going to tell you, your template warning letters, your citations, anything you are issuing today externally can all still happen. However, the suggestion is, if it's not electronic, scan it and attach it. If you issue a warning letter, scan it and snail mail it out to them, drop it on their doorstep through an inspection, whatever. If you cite them, document or scan electronic. However, one last type of activity. When you do issue those things that are generated outside of Acela, our suggestion is minimally, you come in and you add an activity. This time it's the code notification activity, not the violation. And these notification types are customizable. If you issued a citation today, it's done, by the way. I actually was on an inspection today. I went out just to do a site visit, a follow-up inspection. And now we're at the end. I've done multiple warnings. Now we're doing a citation. I'm just coming back in and recording that I issued a citation today. Normal, you can indicate the citation number, whatever's appropriate, reconcile, so you can reconcile things together. And yes, I still suggest you scan it in or you attach it electronically to documents. Even though here in activities, you're recording that it happened, that the code officer issued that. And I'm saying a citation, putting in today's date, I could put the citation number down here, up here. I can tell you this note does not show, but the top note does. And what I mean by that is this description shows, but this notes field doesn't. I have to actually open the activity to see this, but I don't have to open the activity to see this field. It's displayed right here. So that makes a difference on where you put information because you want it to be more easily seen without having to actually open the activity. And so, again, there are multiple kinds of code notifications. We'll customize this list for you. So if I am sending out a snail mail, a warning letter today, warning letter, yes, it's going to be recorded by date, but I might put in the date that, we threw it into the mail. It's completed. Oh, it's completed. I just sent it out. And I know this seems redundant of this date, but this is documenting it in the record date information. This is about managing things through the task list. These dates allow you to kind of manage when something was started versus when it's maybe due to be compliant or it's done. Whereas this date down here is literally recording it as the date, the notification date that you mailed out a warning letter, the date that you issued a citation. Whereas these dates are about managing tasks. And I would I would either scan that warning letter in and attach it to documents, or if it's in an electronic format, I would upload it. Okay, so these two activities are pretty integral to the way that the module is designed to work and the reports that we provide you. There are monthly reports. Well, there's not monthly reports for code, I guess you'd say. There are workload reports. There are workflow reports. Let me see, statistical reports, code compliance case stats, code compliance closed cases. How many cases are closed? And then there's another one that's open cases. Why I don't see it here, but I know it's there. I tested it and approved it. So I think it might be this one. This is probably open and these are closed. And you get to put in the date range. So when I run this report, closed after this date or closed before and after this date. So you get to decide the time range for when you want to report how many cases were closed in that time frame. The reports about the categories, the activity reports, activities by staff and record. Violation activity is looking at these and only these kind. So the reporting is heavily dependent on the way that you manage activities. I have a few agencies that use the code module that elect to not use activities. They just use it way more high level, and they don't get down into the granular violations. But then I can tell you, then some of these reports are going to be useless for you. If you don't put it in, we can't give you the data. So, Anastasia, can we track the ones that have gone to court? Yes. Okay. So, Anastasia's question is about tracking stuff that might have gone to court and have legal fines and things like that. Yeah. So, we're doing our thing. We did our initial investigation. In summary, we did our initial investigation. We decided 2 things out of 4 were actual violations. Do I think it would be super great to actually cite them? I do, but do you have to? No. Due date, tentative compliance timeline, whether it's hard, fast, or it's just a goal. That. So then we create our activities, and then we're going out and we're doing inspections, field visits, follow-up inspections to check on these things to see if they're compliant. Eventually, we get down back into workflow, because don't forget workflow. It's just kind of sitting here in the investigation process. There's a couple things here. Case update notes is a workflow status that allows you to just add notes to this case. High level, global notes to this case. Not notes that are on activities, not notes that are happening when you go out and do your follow-up inspections. This is some sort of just more general, all-inclusive kind of case update notes. Starting to have problems with the tenant, they're not responsive to letters, or they're not answering calls any longer. I don't know, just general high-level notes. A case update note result will not close the case. A citation, if I say citation here in workflow, it will close this case. So if you do not want the issuance of a citation to close this record, don't use workflow to document the citation. Instead, use activities and your inspection process, because remember in inspections, one of the status results now, or inspection types, is citation. So use other means to document your citation if you do not want the record to close. Because in workflow, I'm on the workflow tab, by the way, that's the life cycle of the record from beginning to end. Here, if I say citation, this record will close as soon as I hit submit. Case closed. Compliant. Now I should come into workflow and say compliant once all of the line item violations have been determined to be in compliance as per follow-up inspections. So compliant will close the case as well, but compliant means that everything has been handled. It's done. They've complied to anything you told them they had to fix as per violations. Invalid. Sometimes we create a case, an investigation record, and something gets twisted along the way, and essentially this investigation becomes invalid and we're done. That will close the record too. Investigation closed is you matter-of-factly saying, not that they're compliant, but you're closing the investigation either by order of your management, something came, I don't know. A decision was made to close the investigation. Referred to agency, Anastasia, is a bit of what I was kind of hailing back to your question, that when they've gone to court and it's fines imposed by the judge, liens on property, etc. Referred to agency here in workflow means referred to court, referred to police. It's done with code enforcement. Your part of the job is likely or majority done. It's out of your authority now. It's now with the court or with the police or whoever else. This will close the case. Sometimes that is just not the way it goes down. There's an activity for, hold on, I got to explore it very quickly. Notification. No. Hold on real quick. There's an activity here. Maybe it's under violation. Maybe deferred. I'm trying to kind of brainstorm a little bit live here while we're talking about this. Deferred to agency, maybe, you would put here then, referred to court and judge, whatever the case might be, and then maybe deferred, you're recording it. Now, an activity will never close the record. So if you need the record to remain open, then maybe use of an activity to kind of document that that's happened, Anastasia, would be most ideal. Okay, you manage it through the court and payments before you ever close the case. Yeah. So definitely not going to use workflow then to do it, because unfortunately workflow, if I say referred to agency, it means kind of like your part, you're at the end of your authority. You're done. Your case is closed and the record will close. And in a lot of agencies, referred to agency is just not appropriate. That isn't the case, just like for you, like you said, Anastasia. So activities, like I said, we'll customize. Maybe under code notification here, we put referred to agency or referred to court. It is a type of notification or update, or maybe you do use workflow, but instead of actually resulting the investigation as referred to agency officially, I do a case update notes. And I say referred to court, civil penalties, if I could spell, will be determined, by the judge. And I think this would be a great way, to document that part of the process, Anastasia, and maybe the most prevalent, most obvious way to document something like that. It's not going to change the status. It's still just going to kind of say it's in motion, but this would show up as a case update note. in the workflow. It still leaves it as investigation process, still open, case didn't close, but it says there's case update notes. To see any prior notes, you would look at the workflow history. And I could easily see, you know, any notes that the code officer made through case update notes. I think I kind of want to explore that just a tiny bit more, since we just have a minute or two. But any fees or fines, I would never suggest that you use our module to manage civil penalty court fines necessarily, because those can get pretty hanky, and there's usually so much. The court needs to see the payment processing happening, typically through the court clerk, through the court's payment process, not through e-permitting. There's going to be no connection for the court to see payments happening in e-permitting per se. So if it finally goes to court and it becomes civil penalties and liens and things like that, legally speaking, I suggest that fine and fee and payment process happens through the court clerk or through the court process for imposed fines and collections and things like that. Because when they don't pay too, different things happen, right? There might even be a warrant depending on the level of issue or the lien. Those are very legal processes, very legally binding. I would highly suggest that level of fines and civil penalties and liens and things is managed directly through the court once it gets to that. Now, the lien itself can be recorded in Acela. So if there ended up being a lien imposed on this address, on this property, as an agency, you can manage that through your property data. You can log that. So 3415 college, I'm a little outside of our training items today, but I can pull up the address in our addressing data, and I can add a condition to this property saying that there is an active lien enforcement. So I can add conditions, aka flags, to property information to track things like that, like liens, hazardous properties, dangerous buildings. Code compliance handles a lot of these things. Buildings damaged by fire. You name it. You name it. Code enforcement can add condition flags to properties, parcels, people, like property owners. Let's call them slumlords. There's lots of these things where they're managing dangerous properties or letting people live in or on dangerous properties, or things that would qualify as dangerous buildings. A lot of times code compliance is delegated to manage those things on behalf of the building department. And so you need to flag those in the software for all kinds of reasons, not only for tracking, but for safety of your inspectors entering those buildings or properties. Reformed drug houses. So Salem, we actually flagged structures that were former drug labs because our inspectors had to wear respirators before they went on site for their safety. So, there's all those kinds of things that really are heavily wrapped into code compliance and enforcement that are, in fact, that's an excellent question, Anastasia, that should be managed in the system on property, parcels, addresses, owners, etc. You do have to be a little bit cognizant about where they show. if you really don't want something to show through, you need, by default, it will show online if anybody's applying for something at this address. If you don't want it to show, you have to turn that flag, or, you know, turn that setting off. It'll show in the back office, but it will not show online. It won't be public facing. So if anything you tag on to an address, a parcel, or an owner you don't want to show through to the public website, then this is key here. And we could do added training on that. That's more intermediate, kind of advanced training as you start to move forward. Right now, for the purpose of today's training, as we're concluding, some a few minutes over, we need to make sure that you know how to, understand. I lost my stuff there. You understand how to create a new record, you know, how to manage it. By design, how we set this up to all work together, meaning the use of activities to document your line item violations. The use of workflow only to manage the record at a high level, opening it, doing the investigation, ultimately closing it. All the other administrative activities happen through activities, warning letters, notifications, citations. And then you are persistently doing inspections or field visits to monitor their compliance up and until they are compliant. Then you move back into workflow to look at closing the total case. Once any and all of the violations have either become compliant, even if one of the 4 violations has to be referred to the court, the case has to stay open. We have reports, by the way, last little piece here before we conclude, because I know I'm a few minutes over. There is a record-specific report. It's available to you in the record. Sorry, let me just show you there. That's the easiest. Record summary on the individual record. There is a report drop-down right here. The code compliance investigation detail report is this entire record printed out top to bottom. Every inspection and inspection result and activity detail, all of the workflow, etc. This report was developed so that you could literally walk into court with a piece of paper that had everything about this case on it. Hand it off to somebody, submit it to the DA. Well, you know, I don't know, whatever you need to do. This is a top to bottom report of the entire case. This worksite result report is just the inspection report. The authorization form, we didn't cover authorizations in this training because kind of the core functionality all of you need it for most immediately is to track all of your complaints and requests for service. The code authorization record, I mean, we can provide additional info for anybody that's interested, but it's customizable. Again, like I had mentioned, you get to decide what things you want to issue code authorizations for, if anything. This is not complaint management. This is not monitoring, you know, what's coming in the door, so to speak, about like complaints or inquiry tracking. This is logistical authorizations that code compliance is responsible for or delegated to manage and track. Things like temporary camping and RV placement and stuff like that. Sometimes code compliance is responsible for fireworks stands that they are set up, that they go away when the end of the time period they were approved for, you know, that they're gone on July 5th out of the parking lot in the middle of Safeway. You know, a lot of times we see fireworks stands, Christmas tree lots, garage sales. Code compliance a lot of times is responsible to manage garage sales. Lucky you. You know, that you can only have 3 garage sales a year. I see that in a lot of local codes. I see them with records on garage sales like that. It can't cause excessive traffic. And if your neighbors start complaining that there's, you know, traffic is horrible, you can't run a home business. A lot of times code compliance is delegated to manage home occupation stuff and so on, right? Okay, you guys know all that, all those types of examples. I just want to give you some real, you know, meat and potato kind of examples so that you could kind of identify things that might be applicable for code authorizations at your local agency. The authorization type, totally customizable. And it allows you to generate an authorization, quote unquote, permit. So it allows you to generate some sort of printable document that gives them written approval, authorization, from and to dates, etc. It's pretty kind of self-explanatory on that record type. It's kind of short and sweet. There's not a ton to it. You could do inspections on an authorization record if it was appropriate or called for to make sure that they've torn down the fireworks stand on July 5th. I would highly suggest you do not skip over my last little plug, inspection scheduling functionality. It might not feel like it's the same thing, but you need to document every single trip or site visit or follow-up inspection or whatever you want to call it. You need to document every trip you make. A lot of times your staffing levels depend on that data. How many times did you go out into the field? How many trips is each officer doing? And we can't help you to report that data unless you schedule and record your trips, which is AKA inspections. All right, any final questions? I'm happy to stay a little later. I've already kept you over 10 minutes. Otherwise, you can reach out to your assigned project manager.